Hi kindergartners, it's Miss Swan here to do a read aloud with you today. Today we're going to read a nonfiction book called The Oldest Student. And in this book we're going to learn new and true things about this person. Her name is Mary Walker. Before we get started, we're going to do three things. We're going to talk first about a question. That question is, what is something that you didn't used to know how to do, but now you do know how to do that? When you think of that thing that you know how to do now, think about how you learned how to do that thing. What did you need to do in order to know how to do that thing? You can pause the video and talk to someone close to you. Great. There's a word in this book. That word is sharecrop. Let's clap that word together. Sharecrop. Let's chicken. Sharecrop. Let's snap it. Sharecrop. Let's count it. Sharecrop. Sharecrop is a type of work that Mary's going to do, and it's a kind of farming, but she works on a farm that belongs to someone else, and we'll learn more about that. Before we open the book, we're going to look first at the cover, the front cover, and do some noticings. So you can look at that cover, see what you notice, maybe what you wonder. I noticed there's a person right here. I'm guessing this is Mary Walker. I noticed that her eyes are closed and she's hugging a book. Makes me wonder how she's feeling. It looks to me like she's feeling really pleasant. I know a couple things about Mary Walker's identity because I've read this book already. Mary Walker identifies as a woman. She identifies as Black. And her age identity is going to change throughout the book because we're going to read about her whole life. But at the end of the book, she is 116 years old. That's her age identity. All right, let's get started. The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read. Whenever young Mary Walker was tired, she would shield her eyes from the sun and watch the swallow-tailed kites dip and soar above the trees. That must be what it's like to be free, she thought. The author told me that's what it must be like to be free. That makes me think that Mary Walker is not free. She does not have everything she needs to change the world. But Mary didn't watch for long. Even at 8 years old, she knew the first rule of the plantation she lived on: keep working. She knew the second rule too. She wasn't allowed to read or write, or even learn how to do those things. I can tell that Mary doesn't have the freedom to learn. She's not able. She does not have everything she needs in order to learn. Mary didn't stop working. She didn't learn to read either. But at the end of each long day, she would lie in her little bed next to the crumbling fireplace and think about those birds. When I'm free, I'll go where I want and rest where I want, and I'll learn how to read too. When she was 15, it happened. Mary, her mother, brothers, and sister were free. What they didn't have was money, and they didn't know how to get food or clothes or a place to sleep. Mary and her family chose to stay close to where they were. They settled into a one-room cabin, and for the next few years, she worked alongside her mama to help feed her siblings. 7 days a week, she churned butter, cleaned houses, and cared for other folks' children. I know from what the author told me on this page that now she has a home and she has food and she has clothes. But the illustrator is showing me that she's very tired and she's working really hard. One day, Mary met a group of evangelists on the roadside. A woman with soft wrinkles on her kindly face placed a big, beautiful Bible in Mary's hands. Mary didn't know why she was given the Bible. She only knew that top to bottom, front to back, that book was filled with words. I'm going to learn to read these words, she vowed. But not today. Today there was work to be done. I can tell that Mary really wants to learn how to read. There wasn't time tomorrow either. When Mary got married, she and her husband worked as sharecroppers. Oh yeah, I remember that means that they're going to be farming, but it's on someone else's land. They were renting someone else's house using someone else's tools, and planting someone else's seeds to farm the land that they would never own. After they harvested the crops, almost all the money they earned went to pay for the housing, the tool, and seed costs. The author told me almost all the money they earned went to pay for housing, tool, and seed costs. That makes me think that even though they're working very hard, they're not getting a lot of money. Mary was 20 years old when her first son was born. She opened her Bible and marveled at the squiggles inside. There had been no time to learn to read. The author told me there had been no time to learn to read, so I know that Mary still can't read, even though that's a big goal of hers. Mary had 2 more sons. Now she had 3 growing boys. More money, that's what we need, Mary thought. But the only other jobs available to Black women were as maids or nannies or cooks. The hours were long, with only half a day on Saturdays. Off. And like sharecropping, they didn't pay very much. Mary sighed. Words would have to wait. For the next 4 decades, Mary sharecropped and did other jobs to help support her family. I heard the author say that the hours were long and didn't pay much, so I know that she's working really hard, but she's also still not getting a lot of money. I also know that because she's working so much, she doesn't have time to learn how to read, because the author said words would have to wait. She's going to have to wait to learn how to read words. By now, Mary was 68 and too old to sharecrop, but she continued to work, cooking, cleaning, and babysitting. She also fried fish, baked cakes, and sold sandwiches to raise money for her church. On Sundays, she would sit in the congregation, and as the preacher spoke, she would clutch her family Bible. The Bible she still couldn't read. Okay, so now I know Mary's age identity is 68, and she still can't read, even though her whole life she's wanted to learn how to read. When Mary was well past 90, she and her husband sat in their creaky rockers while one or another of their sons read to them. After the 2 younger boys died, the eldest read. Then Mary's husband died. Several years later, her eldest son died too. He was 94. Mary had outlived her entire family. She was 114 years old and alone. Can't read, she said. Can't write. I don't know anything. Mary stood at the window of her retirement home and gazed down at the world below. Words were everywhere, on billboards, on buildings, on store windows and trucks. She sighed. All this time, she thought, and they still look like squiggles. Mary had heard about a new reading class held in her building. She pursed her lips. No more waiting, she decided. Time to learn. Out of her apartment, into an elevator, and down to the lobby she went. When the elevator doors sprang open, Mary saw people sitting under a sign with a picture of an open book. She could not read the words. She gripped her cane, lifted her chin, and walked straight toward that sign. For the next year and more, Mary put everything she had into learning to read. It wasn't easy. After all, she was the oldest student in the class, and probably in the entire country. Could someone her age learn to read? She didn't know, but she was going to try. She studied the alphabet until her eyes watered. She memorized the sounds each letter made and practiced writing her name so many times that her fingers cramped. She learned to recognize sight words and then challenged herself to make short sentences with them. She studied and studied until books and pages and letters and words swirled in her head while she slept. I am having a text-to-self connection because we do so many of those things that she's doing to grow our brains too. I heard her talk about the alphabet and the sounds of the letters. She practiced writing her name. She practiced sight words. We do all of those things in our classroom. That makes me know how hard she's working because I know how hard we work all the time to grow our reading brains. One fine day, Mary's hard work paid off. She could read. Word of her accomplishment traveled, and people everywhere celebrated with her. Chattanooga's mayor, that's the city she lives in, Chattanooga. Chattanooga's mayor, newspaper journalists across the country, and a man from the U.S. Department of Education who said, "Mrs. Mary Walker, I pronounce you the nation's oldest student," all shared her joy. Mary felt complete. She still missed her sons, but whenever she was lonely, she read from her Bible or looked out her window and read the words in the street below. I noticed the illustrator has changed all of those squiggles that were on the pictures before into words. And I think that's because now Mary can read them. They don't look like squiggles anymore. Mary received many gifts over the years: a radio, a sofa, her very first television, a new Bible, the key to the city, and perfume. She also received something that brought back those long days in the Alabama cotton fields, her first airplane ride. From the cockpit window, Mary gazed out at the trees and rooftops below. No different than a horse and buggy ride, she joked, but she knew it was. As the airplane dipped and soared like those swallow-tailed kites, Mary decided that flying was a lot like reading. They both made a body feel as free as a bird. The author told me that reading and flying made her feel as free as a bird, so I know that reading makes Mary feel like she has everything she needs to change the world. It makes her feel free. Each year before her birthday celebration came to an end, someone would whisper, "Let's listen to Miss Mary." The shuffling and movement would fade away until not a sound was heard. Then Mary would stand on her old legs, clear her old throat, and read from her Bible in her schoolbook in a voice, that was clear and strong. When she finished, she would gently close her book and say, "You're never too old to learn." Our good reader question today is, why do you think that reading was so important to Mary? You can take a second and think about your answer, and then pause this video and talk to someone close to you if you can. Great. There are so many reasons that I think that reading was important to Mary, but one of the reasons is I think that it makes her feel free. It makes her feel like she has what she needs to change the world. And I know that because the author said, as the airplane dipped and soared like those swallow-tailed kites, Mary decided that flying was a lot like reading. They both made a body feel as free as a bird. Today, because this book was nonfiction, we're going to fill out our idea web, our nonfiction idea web. The idea web helps us remember what the book was all about and then all of the new and true things that we've learned. Those are called details. So the topic of this book was Mary Walker, that person that we've just learned a lot about. I'm going to copy her name from the book. It's M-A-R-Y-W-A-L-K-E-R. Mary Walker. This book, the topic, it was all about Mary Walker. These boxes all have details, new and true things that we learned about Mary. One of the things that I learned about Mary was that when she learned to read, she was 116 years old. So I'm going to write, she learned. Slide that with me. Learned. She learned to read when she was 116. You can reread this with me. She learned to read when she was 116. So today it's your turn. You're going to finish this idea web with 3 more things that we learned about Mary Walker, that we know are new and true about Mary Walker. We can't wait to see your work. Feel free to send us pictures or videos of you reading your work. We would love to see them or post them. Thank you for reading with me today.